coming. This is really above our expectations. And Scout, when you talk with Kean, would you see if we can get a discount for the lack of air conditioning in this place? When we came here the other day, we recognized there may be an issue with the air, but we didn't expect it to be like this, right, brother? We put these programs together really because we have an opinion. I hear my own opinion every day. I don't need to hear myself talk. And we may not all agree on everything, but I would like to think the thing that we can agree on is that why should the kids go through this? And it just isn't necessary. It's avoidable. But before I get into my spiel, and I'm going to cut it down quite a bit because we're sort of running late, and as Lori said, we really want to engage you guys about how this issue impacts you, affects you, what you think about the issue, and what we can all do together to ensure that one more child doesn't see this in their life. So I'll be brief, but I really have to thank a lot of people, so that may take longer than my speech. I want to thank the Kean University for having us tonight. John Rao and Felice Vasquez and their teams made this possible. Dr. Bach in the Public Administration Department were critical in making this thing come together. And of course to Pi Alpha Alpha, the Global Honor Society for Public Affairs Administration, led by Scout, of course, but I'll get to you individually in a minute, so don't think you're bow yet. And certainly to our esteemed panel, where I'm always humbled when we can bring sitting assembly people or senators out to join us for these things. It just shows us how passionate they are about why they support legislation like this and why advocacy matters. So, Assemblywoman Chaparro, Assemblywoman Carter, thank you very much for being here. Our experts, Dr. Brandwine, and of course Lori Lynn, their perspective is extraordinarily valuable, and there are only two of the many stakeholders that are involved in what it is that we talk about. There are plenty others. There's the legal professionals, alternate legal, educators, which are critical, counselors who deal with these issues in schools and so forth. So when we continue with these programs, we hope to bring other stakeholders and their perspectives. So we hope to see you as we continue to build this out, and we tend to modify it to make sure that we're meeting the needs of what it is that our audience wants to hear. Ginger's film, very important film, very powerful, very emotional, and I want to thank Lisa Carl personally for driving that part of the program today. So thank you, Lisa. Joe, of course, Sonia, and the other volunteers from FAN-PAC, thank you guys very much, because this stuff doesn't happen up here. If you guys don't do it, you guys do back there. So thank you for that. Also, Jenny Burse and her team are here. Jenny's a family law attorney and been very involved with causes relating to equal access for parents, things of that sort. They've created a clothing line or a wearable line called Exchange, correct? Exchange wear, which all the proceeds will be going to organizations like ours around the country who do the work that we do to help ensure that the family court does a better job of meeting the needs of our children. So thank you, Jenny, and your team for that. There are other members here, people here who this couldn't happen without. Arminio Mendoza, thank you very much for your company's contribution to the programs this evening, and those contributions in real dollars and in time are extraordinarily valuable. So thank you. There are actually two other people who could not be here and could never unfortunately be here again. Senator Anthony Pucco. He has been fighting for legislation like this for 20 years. Why? Why? He lived through it. He experienced it. Unfortunately, he passed over the summer, and he'll be missed for people like us who believe he did a good thing. And also David Perry Davis, who has been a long-time advocate for fairness and equity in the family courts. He passed suddenly, also recently. He will be missed in the courtrooms and in how people look at what the family court is supposed to be. He's done tremendous work to ensure especially indigent litigants, get access to counsel, which was not common until David did his work. There are many others, but Scout Hartley, dude, great job, brother. As Scout said, we met at Ryder in the, I guess, April. And his passion is the only reason why we're here tonight. We do what we do, but we couldn't be doing what we do tonight without you, brother. So his leadership and his passion, you don't see it in very many young men, so thank you, brother. I can't even say it, so. Rafael Franco, President of FAN-PAC. When your car has no gas, when you got a flat tire, he will push it up the hill. He'll make sure it slows down the hill. But he will be there. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the formal portion of what it is I wanted to say. Father and his son are in a car accident. Terrible accident. They get rushed to the hospital. Different hospitals. Son gets wheeled into the emergency room. Doctor looks at him and says, "Oh my gosh, I can't operate on you. You're my son." Who's the surgeon? How about if I asked it, all right, you guys don't know. How about if I asked it this way? See, this is 2019. When I heard that in 1970, I had no idea it was the mother. We didn't think of women as doctors then. How could we have possibly considered the surgeon would be the mother? If I would have asked it, who was the surgeon, if it was a mom and a son in the car accident, it'd be easy. We look at the family court the same way. We have to recondition how they think of the roles of mothers and fathers, because those children are the next generation of mothers and fathers. And unless we meet their needs early, they're going to be just as dysfunctional as their parents were. That can't continue. So I remember meeting Assemblywoman Woman Spate in Trenton last June. She told us a story. She was in the family court in Union County, and she was in a different matter, but she was in her official capacity. And she remembers meeting a father who was crying unconsolably. And she said, "Well, what happened?" So he told her the story that he went to court, and mom wanted to get the kids out of state. He didn't have an attorney. 5 minutes later, those kids were on their way out of state. She said she didn't know what to say. And I was there with Tara McCann, who was also a big advocate for what we do. And we looked at her and we said, you know, certainly we all can relate to that. But the bigger issue is, what are those kids thinking when they're looking out the back window? What are they thinking? They weren't in the courtroom. They didn't have a lawyer or not have a lawyer. They didn't have any say at all in what happened. So let me explain to those of you who don't know what really happens when you and your ex, or your soon-to-be ex, don't agree. You fight. You fight for custody. You want these days, she wants those days, he wants that, she wants this. So you file a motion. And you send loads of papers into the court, right? Thick, 3-4 inches thick of exhibits and proofs and whatever else you got to do. You cite case law and blah, blah, blah. She says the same thing that you sent back. By the time you're done, the judge has a stack of papers 10 inches tall in front of him. Do you think the judge reads all that? Do you think the judge has the time to read that for 20, 50, 100 litigants during a period of time? No way. Who does read it? Well, if you're lucky, maybe the clerk reads it. Maybe. And that clerk, who's got very little experience in the law at all, never mind the family law, he or she will write a synopsis of, what do you call those shorter books? Cliff notes. A Cliff Note version of each of your positions. Then maybe, if you're represented by counsel, you go before the judge on motion day. Maybe the judge will let your attorney talk, her attorney talk, then you talk one more time. 10 minutes go by, you have a decision already. How could anybody, this is not a knock against the system in that sense, how could they possibly know the dynamics of the family? It's not possible. It just simply isn't. So when we conceptualize the idea of advocacy, what do we think of? Well, we want it to stop before it gets to that point. We don't want either litigant, we don't want litigants at all. We want parents, and we want children. We want to craft laws and recondition people to understand we can prevent some of this stuff. It's a complex issue. Human beings are human beings. So they're going to do what they're going to do. But if enough people knew before they walked in the courtroom they had nothing to gain by withholding parenting time or vice versa, then some of the stuff would disappear before it ever got to this point. So when we think about legislation and legislative partners, and I really want to thank certainly Assemblywoman Carter for sharing a story about how she's an erased aunt. I never knew that before tonight. We want it to stop before it gets to that point. Prevention is a big part of the equation here. So when we talk about reconditioning the court, it's about educating the court, all the stakeholders in the system before it gets there, and the attorneys as well, to know that they will have nothing to gain by going into court and spending hours upon hours. And that only feeds the conflict, right? So this attorney wants their client to win, this attorney is advocating for their client. One of them may win, one of them may lose, but sure enough, the one certainty in all of it, the kids always lose. That's not acceptable. We don't accept it when it comes to other things with our kids, right? We pass laws, car seat laws, right? Analogous to what we're trying to do, I think, is the conversation about bullying. But at some point in time in our recent history, we decided that bullying was no good. We can't have it. Now, whether or not we can argue about the means and methods of combating the idea of bullying, but the one thing we don't really argue is we know that there's a real consequence to kids who get bullied. And we have now committed significant resources to ensuring that that doesn't happen. We want the same kind of resources and education, training to go into this sort of issue. And we want parents, when they think about fighting, to know that it's not going to help. And they're going to know that it has real consequences, both them and more importantly their children. And when a case goes before a court, that judge is prepared to, just as they would mitigate or to deal with an issue that regards child support, right? They take away your license, put you in jail, passports, all kinds of things, no questions asked. The idea of a parent withholding time from a child with no consequences has also got to end. We have to think in terms of making sure that we do whatever it takes to show these people, these parents, that sort of abuse, well, that sort of behavior is abusive in nature. You may not be able to see the bruises, the bumps, the scratches or scrapes of what we think of traditional abuse, but it is abuse, and it needs to end. And we need to come together to recognize that we can do better. We must do better. So I think I read none of my notes here. I don't know why I even bother to spend hours doing this stuff when I just speak that way anyway. But I recently came across a quote that we've sort of been using in our papers. Now I can't even find it, all this stuff that I have. But it was written by Alvin Toffler. And I'm more directing this to the student population here because Scout and I talked about advocacy in action, the real world, what it really is like when you want to see something that exists become different, you want to see it change. Or at least when we want to see it transformed to something it's not. And he said it this way, he said, our moral responsibility is not to stop the future, but to shape it, to channel our destiny in humane directions, and to ease the trauma of transition. I don't know, when I saw that quote, to me, that just speaks of this system and about divorce, and how about we need to ease the trauma of transition for our children. Oops, excuse me. And that's the crux of what we do as advocates, right? I don't have to agree with everything that we all think of as being true. There are all kinds of truths. I know what my responsibility was as a parent. I didn't need to go to school for it. It just was ingrained in me, right? This is how you do it. You spend time with your kids. You make memories, You kick them in the butt sometimes. You praise them out. You hug them. You read them a story. You put them to bed. You get up in the morning. Blah, blah, blah. all that stuff is, you just know to do as a parent. And most of us instinctually know how to do that. But when there is a disconnect with either one or both of those parents, and it goes to the court needs to be trained on how to deal with those issues. And we're here committed to bringing together more stakeholders, more events like this, to ensure that we flesh out the means and methods and a suite of solutions that we can use to better train the court personnel, stakeholders, our legislative partners, and anybody else who will listen, so we can ensure that our children have a better opportunity to love and be loved by both. That's all I got.